Okay, what I'd like to start with is just to kind of get you in a reflective mood, and Maria did a great job sort of introducing us or reinforcing the idea of self-care and keeping ourselves full to do all the myriad of things we do. So this quote really helps with that sort of representation. And the quote is, "Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I'm changing myself." Everything you do starts here. And even more so, it starts inside you. So what your thoughts are, what your beliefs are, what your values are, all have impact on how you are in the world. And my background in nursing, in human development, and developmental psychology, all of this has pretty much come to a fore for me in this great experience of coaching. And let me go back a little. The theme for the Maine Women's Network this year of finding balance is so important. And one of the ways or pieces of finding balance is having an idea about intention and resilience, understanding what those things are and how they can get you closer to that idea of finding balance. And actually, even more so, when I think about the idea of finding balance, balance isn't out here somewhere and we're looking for it like it's lost or hidden. It's really creating it. You have to create your own balance, and one of the first steps is awareness of what is out of balance and what's sort of lacking in your everyday life, in your world. So one of the things that coaches do a lot of is helping people raise that awareness of finding balance and looking at all of one's areas of life. So what your life areas are that represent who you are and how you are in the world. And all of this really consolidates down to this center aspect of how you are, who you are in the world. So becoming aware of that, going really deep inside, that idea of, changing yourself, first becoming aware of who you are and who you might want to be. And if something's holding you back from that, starting to sort of assess and look at what are those areas of life that might interfere with that. And a little piece to help get clarity, words are really powerful. So whenever I use words, especially words that are in the title of a talk, I want to be sure that we all understand what those words mean to us. So when you think of the word intention, if we're raising awareness, so we create balance in our life intentionally, what does intention mean? This is the interactive part.
With thought.
With thought. With purpose.
I was going to say on purpose.
On purpose, nice. With purpose, on purpose. Now that's good. There's another quote that says, the purpose of life is to live on purpose, right? And that requires intention. So knowing what that is and being mindful of what that is helps support you to move toward it, to be more purposeful. Any other words that come up for people when you think about intention? And planning takes thought. It takes having some sense of a purpose or a goal, and there are different words that people use for that. An overarching, I'm sorry, somebody else have another one?
Focus. Putting all the energy into that focus.
So sort of focus with energy. Those are definitely two that are very connected and very tied. One sort of overarching word to think about related to intention is the idea of presence. That you are present in the moment and paying attention. That will help you move forward towards that goal, that sense of awareness. So then when you think of resilience, resilience is really important, and we'll move a little forward in talking about when challenges come in front of us. We're moving along with intention, with thought, with purpose, with mindfulness, with focused energy and planning, but then there's something that gets in our way, and we have to deal with that, and that has to do with resilience. So what does resilience mean when you hear the word resilience? Bounce back. So your ability to bounce back. Excuse me? Strength. And tell me a little bit more what you mean by that, Tabitha. That word inner is important. We're not talking about the outward muscle. It really is about inner strength. Flexibility.
Open-minded.
Other words for people? Resilience. Sort of a so in other words, sort of combining the idea of change. Change is the only constant. We can always count on change. So being able to adapt to new realities through change or whatever it is that's causing that new reality. So those are all, I mean, we could go on and come up with other words, but being mindful of what the words mean is important to then incorporate them into the idea of creating balance. So presence in the sense of having intention, and resilience in terms of that inner strength, being very aware of what you bring from the inside of yourself, your who, all these areas that are represented on this wheel in terms of understanding that sense of who. And one little tidbit from sort of my human development days is thinking about change and thinking about how people do adjust. Are people familiar with crisis theory? Crisis theory holds that life's going along, in a typical kind of fashion. Something happens, one of those changes or those unexpected things that occur in your life. Crisis theory holds that you'll never go back to the way you were. You are affected by that change. And it's usually on both an external, but even more importantly on an internal basis. So if you don't go back to the way you were, what are the options? You build a new you, more specifically, sort of going by crisis theory. You adapt, but what happens to how you're performing? You're not performing at the same level. Yeah, you're either going to perform at a higher level or a lower level. That's crisis theory. You may or may not agree with it, but it's crisis theory. So what's going to determine which way you go here?
How you end that situation.
How you what?
How you
end
that
it?
situation is really where you're taking off from.
And what does that require? Making decisions.
Taking action. Taking some kind of action.
Taking action.
Your attitude.
Your attitude. All of those things are pertinent. But it's that awareness. It's taking action with intention. But even more importantly, your resilience, your ability to bounce back, to really recognize the situation, pull from your inner strength, and use it to grow. Learn from the experience and grow. The risk is without that awareness, without that intention, without that resilience, you function at a lower level. So then you could carry crisis theory out again. What happens when you know something else is going to happen unexpectedly? So same thing. You're going to go up or you're going to go down. A lot of people continue to do this because they lose perspective, they lose mindfulness, they lose intention, and they don't have a lot of resilience. The opposite is true in the opposite direction. So gaining clarity and mindfulness out of intention and resilience is really the goal. Increasing your awareness, increasing your consciousness, and really moving forward with those two things sort of helping lead you. So this is that unintentional thing that comes to us sometimes more often than we want. The idea that there's a wall, that proverbial wall, a challenge, whatever it is that gets in your way. And this comic really represents it well, I think. Welcome to another one of life's brick walls standing squarely in your path. So what are you going to do? And you see the objects that are on the wall to assist you in dealing with the wall. One is going over, One is under, one is around, and one is through. We all don't necessarily have wings that we can pull out of our backpack and strap on. That'd be kind of nice and just fly over that wall. But we could dig under it, we could go around it, we could go through it. What's missing here? Exactly. Note that there's taking no action was not an option. That is a hallmark of resilience and intention. I'm sorry? Going through it would be, you have to kind of knock it down to go through it, which I don't have my pointer, but which is this. Yeah, that's going through it. And sometimes that does take, that what we talked about first, Maria mentioned the idea of focusing your energy, being mindful of what your energy is. And when we are confronted sometimes with walls, we go down to what we call a fight or flight response, which is kind of our base response. We either kind of retreat, and sometimes we need to collect ourselves, to get awareness, to get intention. Okay, what are we going to do now? Sometimes we get aggressive, we get angry. Those are both very low levels of energy. Becoming aware of your being in that low level of energy helps you then potentially shift to a high level of energy and do the work of resilience in terms of figuring out how you're going to get over, through, around, or under this wall. These walls are somewhat inevitable. So how we think about things, our thoughts impact how we feel about things, which then impact our action. So bring it right back to that sense of mindfulness, that sense of awareness, so that we can have intention to move forward and decide how we're going to move forward. So to give a little bit more of a demonstration for you to bring this into your own lives, there's paper on the table. There's bigger pieces of paper, and there's tabs of paper as well. So whichever size paper, what I'm going to have you do is fold the paper in half and list on that half paper, only sort of look at one side at a time, what all your internal messages of intention and resilience are. The voices in your head that either provide you a sense of awareness, of inner strength, of moving forward, of taking charge, and bouncing back from an adversity that may have presented itself to you. So the messages in your head about being intentional and resilient. In other words, I can do this, I didn't expect this to happen, but it's okay, I'm just going to take a deep breath and I'm going to go forward. What are the messages that you give yourself that support intention and resilience? And I might not give you the full 2 minutes only because we're a little tight on time. Going down with that one. Flip your paper to the other half and write your internal messages that interfere with intention and resilience. Like, oh, this happens again. Nothing ever goes right for me. I can't do this. I feel like giving up. I'm so frustrated. I'm so angry. So the internal messages or voices in your head that interfere with intention and resilience. So if I can share with you what I observed as you're doing this, when I asked you to list the internal messages that supported intention and resilience, you all kind of went blank. You all looked at me like, what is she talking about? What does she mean? Giving you a little bit more information, I saw acknowledgement and understanding, but still not a lot of writing. Took a little bit longer. So what was it like for you to write down the messages of intention and resilience, your internal messages?
It was a positive thing.
Excellent.
I definitely, like, because a lot of stuff I wrote down is what I'm trying to practice and what I sort of
excellent
preach, like maybe to my family members.
So there's a great awareness there, which is what Fran's.
I would say it's not 100%, but it's
work in progress. It always is, and that's okay. Others, what was the experience like? Compare it to the writing your second list, the things that interfere with intention and resilience. What was that like?
I actually found that harder. Yeah, I did too.
Good. This is a very aware group. That's not typical. That's not typical. What typically happens is people, once they, get into that mode of recognizing those internal negative voices, they're very quick to recognize and write them down. And then when they switch it, sometimes it's harder, because it is a work in progress, to write those more awareness statements that are supporting intention and supporting resilience. So you guys are definitely above the average in terms of that recognition. It's usually opposite. This is another tool that you can do with identifying strengths and skills. This is sort of a piece of workshops that I give, that we really spend a lot of time teasing these things out. So when you think about building intention and resilience, it's really holistic at 5 levels. It kind of goes along with thinking about your life balances across multiple levels, multiple areas of your life. So when you think about building intention, being mindful that it is at these 5 levels, your physical self, which leads to wellness when you have good intention or clear intention, and resilience when you're very mindful and present and conscious of those things. And that's obviously your bodily self, your emotional self, your feeling self, which again leads to a more sense of mindfulness when you can recognize. And one of the sort of indicators related to having great intention and resilience related to emotion is when something is upsetting to you, there's usually an immediate emotional reaction, and that's the thing, it's a reaction. Those of us who are working like Fran and becoming very aware of being more intentional and resilient, they take a moment, they use their prefrontal cortex, which is the CEO of the brain, and they make a choice of how they want to respond. They don't let their emotional center, which is in the center part of our brain, be the knee-jerk response to the situation, because that is a reaction. And reactions tend to be things like when you go to the doctors and they hit your knee and your knee flies up. We don't have intention behind that, it just happens. When we don't have intention behind emotion, we tend to react to things. We don't stand back and say, okay, I'm upset, but I'm going to choose how I'm going to respond to the situation. So you're also then less likely to say, well, you made me do that. You made me feel like that. You make the choice in terms of how you're going to respond to the situation. So that your emotional self. Your mental self speaks to sort of your mind in terms of your thought process based on values and beliefs. So where you are in that regard, building these areas. Your spiritual self is even more so that uniqueness of who you are, who you believe yourself to be, and maybe who you're working towards in terms of who you want to be. And social self. Relationships are critically important to having intention, having resilience, being mindful, and creating balance, not so much finding balance. And to sort of tag on a little bit to what Maria was saying, thinking about the idea of taking care of oneself, which I agree is one of the key aspects in a lot of the work we do as coaches. But to give you a visual of that, and pardon my artistic endeavors here, but this represents a glass. That is half. So when you look at this, how many of you see this glass half full? Okay, looks like a fair majority. And how many of you see it half empty? You don't have to necessarily fess up if you don't want to, I understand. That's okay. But that's also giving you a little insight in terms of what those thoughts are in your mind, where they lead your emotions and where they lead your action. But in terms of self-care and taking care of yourself, what's most important to me here, it almost doesn't matter in my mind whether you see it, you're on to me, half full or half empty. It's half. It's half. We need to be full. We need to be filled up to be our full selves and to do and be in the world the way we want to. Think about your car running on a half a tank of gas. You're only going to get half as far as you want to go. So it isn't about being selfish in this regard. It's being self-full and taking care of yourself, not at the expense of others. That would then potentially be selfish, but recognizing half is half. And we need to think about how we keep ourselves full, how we keep ourselves whole, which will help us with this idea of having intention, building in resilience, being really mindful of what those things mean. So how you create balance. So some resilient strategies, and I'm really shortcutting a lot of my stuff, and give me the when you need me to. So think about those messages that you give yourself and overhaul them or adjust them if they need to be adjusting, and work hard at being mindful about what those messages are, those old tapes that might be in your head from probably or potentially childhood, from an old job where you might not have felt appreciated, acknowledged, those kinds of things. They can haunt you. And my little parenthetical forward is Henry Ford's statement, if you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right. So what you're telling yourself is hugely important. So think about that in terms of building intention and specifically resilience. Think about internal rewards instead of external rewards. If you do something for somebody, don't wait for them to react to decide how it feels to you. If you're doing something for someone, get an internal reward. That felt good to do that for that person. It almost doesn't matter how they respond to you at that point. But if you're always depending on external rewards, you're sort of limiting your ability to have greater intention, greater awareness, and greater resilience. And sort of, this is my ocean metaphor, thinking about the ocean on the surface is affected by everything, by wind, by rain, by boats, by sea life. It's affected by everything. It's always moving, always changing, sometimes dramatically. But if you just go underneath the surface of the ocean, what's it like? Calm, yeah, and it's always that way. So be thinking about how you can be underneath and not affected by all the stuff external to you. So finding those internal rewards, thinking about responding versus reacting, so that you engage. As adults, we can engage our CEO, our prefrontal cortex. Teenagers can't. This is why we have so much trouble with teenagers. If you looked into their prefrontal cortex, it'd be like looking at an online site that said still under development. It's not there yet, but we as adults do not have that excuse. We can tap into that, but we have to be mindful of it to not act out of our emotional center. And this is that to me relates to Viktor Frankl, if people are aware of him, having written Man's Search for Meaning. This is one of the most powerful books out there. This is someone who survived Auschwitz, and he talked about how no matter how dire your situations are, you can choose how to react to it. You can choose your response to the situation, no matter the horror of the conditions. And he did that, and he survived over, obviously, thousands who did not, and some who were stronger in body than him, but he was stronger in mind. He chose how to respond to really terrible situations. See setbacks as opportunities to learn and grow. Edison learned far more from his mistakes and talks about that. There would not have been successes without the mistakes. So mistakes are learning. See them as such. They help you learn and grow, will make you more resilient. Accept yourself. Recognize your strengths, your skills. You can do that same little exercise, identifying strengths and skills, and recognizing that you are human and you have frailties, as do others. So that idea of having empathy and compassion for yourself as well as for others. If you can cultivate it for yourself, you probably will more genuinely have it for others. Again, internal starts here, Rumi's quote at the beginning. And the idea of being engaged and connected to others, and having that be at a level of real compassion and respect. And building on all these other things, you get to that level. Again, shifting energies and being really mindful about how you're doing that. I won't spend a long time on this because I know we're starting to run long, but one great way to build intention, and this is something you can do in the car, it's not one of these deep kinds of yogic breaths, but is either to think of a triangle or you could think of a square, whichever works for you. And you breathe up once. I'm pointing on my screen like you can see that I'm pointing, need my finger. But the goal is that you count to 7 on an inhalation, and then you let out 7 on the exhalation, and then you have no breath. It's very relaxing to have no breath. And if you breathe and work up 3 breaths, 5 breaths, 7 breaths, whatever you're capable of. And if you do it with movement, any people here do yoga? sun salutation, if you do it with even a modified sun salutation, so as you breathe in and go up the triangle, you use your movement and you're breathing in, you get to the top and then you let it out and then you just hold it for 5 to 7 and then do it again. About 3 of those. It really calms you, allows you to be more aware, allows you to be more energetically focused and to have that kind of intention and mindfulness. Some people have trouble with the triangle. You can always also use a square, and it's the same sort of thing, breathing up one side. This time you hold at the top of the breath, and then you let it out, counting anywhere 5 to 7, and then you hold again. So visualizing, and you can do the sun salutation movement with it, and that's vinyasa. And when you combine your breath with your movement, it's very calming. So if you're in the car and you're at a stoplight, you're late for a meeting or feeling anxious, if you think of a square or a triangle and breathe up one side, breathe down the other and hold, or use the square, breathe up, hold, breathe down, hold, you'll be able to engage in a higher level of intention, as well as the idea of resilience when you are faced with that proverbial wall that comes up in front of you at different times. So one of the last things I just wanted to leave you with, because again, timing, is this fabulous quote. I used it every semester in my human development and developmental psychology course by Charles Swindoll, that talks about attitude, which is your perspective. It leads intention, it leads resilience, it leads clarity, it leads mindfulness. But the longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It's more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than whatever other people think I say or do. It's more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, a home. The remarkable thing is that we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for that day. We cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one string we have, and that is our attitude. And I am convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our own attitudes. So again, building that intention, building that mindfulness allows you to respond to situations, to have that presence, have that clarity of mind. So just a few things to help you think further related to your own life. What attitude do you bring to your day every day? What attitude do you bring to each meeting you go to each activity that you do, even your down times? Start to challenge yourselves to raise your mindfulness, to raise your intention about what the thoughts are in your head. Again, thoughts, we aren't our thoughts, number one. Our thoughts are separate from us, and we do have control over them. So being mindful of our thoughts, they will lead to an emotional response or reaction, which will lead to a outwardly in the world action. So starting with your thoughts, you can change how you choose to be in the world, and maybe move towards sort of that whole blossoming of who you want to be, who you know you are capable of being, but have not been allowed to for various circumstances in your life. So being really mindful of these various aspects. One of the last things I'll say is related back to the idea of the wheel and finding balance. When I work with clients and I use the wheel, and there are very variable variations of the wheel, but inevitably, the part of the wheel that is most out of balance is the part that speaks to how we have joy and fun in our life. Simple. What do you do for fun? How do you fill your cup up? What do you do to restore? Those are not unimportant or selfish things. They're hugely important and will build that sense of intention and resilience over time as well. So really being mindful about those simple things. And we could spend a lot of time talking about meaning and purpose and identifying those things and your passions. It's all part of creating balance in your life, intentionally, mindfully, with a sense of resilience. So I could talk on, but we need to end. Any comments, questions? Thank you.
Thank you.